Cool. Thank you so much, Guido. My name's Arabelle, and again, I'm with CAFF, here with my colleagues, Paulina and Maria. I'm gonna quickly share my slides, and then we will jump in and introduce ourselves. Okay. Okay, how's that looking for everybody? Good? Okay, awesome. Okay, so thanks everybody for being here again. The title of this webinar is On-Farm Record Keeping Technologies and Strategies. So each of the three of us sort of brings a little bit of a different approach and background to this topic. We're going to each take around 15-20 minutes to present, and then we'll leave a 15-minute window for questions at the end. So as Guido mentioned, please feel free to use the Q&A function in the bottom of your Zoom window. Um, Slide still working okay? Okay, great. Okay, so I'll introduce myself first. My name is Arabelle Schoenberg. Again, I work for CAFF, Community Alliance with Family Farmers. I'm the Bay Area Regional Lead of Farmer Services. So, along with my colleague Paulina, we work together on doing sort of post-harvest and pre-sale regulatory advising with CAFF. We work a lot on food safety certifications, organic certifications. We're working on some programming around value-added products and their certifications. And so I represent the North and East Bay areas. I'm based here in Sonoma County. And then, addition to my work at CAFF, I was a farmer and farm manager for many years here in the North Bay before working at CAFF. So I'm going to be talking about my experience both, sort of with my hat at CAFF as a regulation advisor, and then as well my experience actually managing farms and yeah, sort of what is the burden and what are some strategies for managing record keeping on the day to day as a very busy farmer who's managing a lot of stuff at the same time. And hopefully we can break this down and make it simpler for y'all. And I'll turn it over to Paulina to introduce herself.
Good morning, everyone. As Arabelle shared, I'm Paulina. I'm the Central Coast Farmer Services Regional Lead. So do a lot of the work that Arabelle does, but here in the Central Coast, and I'm based out of Salinas. Thank you all for being here. And Maria, take it away.
Thanks, everybody. My name is Maria Ridoutt-Orozco. I'm also with CAFF. I'm the Small Farm Technology Advisor, and I provide free technical assistance to farmers in their journey to adopt new technologies.
Okay, let's jump in. So just really quickly, I'm going to present this legal disclosure, which is something we use a lot, Paulina and I, in the course of our work, just to let you know that, we're sort of presenting our advice in good faith. And as always, you should check with your specific regulators and certifying agencies when it comes to questions of certification and legal compliance.
Arabelle, just quickly, if you want to advance your slides,
Oh,
it wasn't presenting. It's still on the title slide.
oh no. Is that working or no?
We still see your title slide.
Weird. Okay. It's working from my side. Let me restart my share. Okay, is that looking better?
Yeah, we're on slide 2 right now.
Okay. And then when I scroll, is it scrolling?
Nope.
Okay. Is it scrolling now?
No.
No,
Ugh, okay. Guido, can we get your advice in here? I'm sorry, this was working before.
no worries.
I can try sharing my screen.
Sure, thanks,
That works
Maddie.
for everybody. Okay. Just need a quick second here. Okay. Can everybody see my screen now?
Yeah, we see the Canva.
Okay. What about now? Yes?
Yes.
Awesome.
Cool, looks good. Okay, so sorry about that. Yeah, maybe Maria, you can just show the legal disclosure page and then I'll get into the agenda. Okay, great. So, just to get into our agenda here, I'm going to talk first. Um, I'm going to talk about essentially my experience with record keeping and trying to articulate to you all the myriad benefits of keeping good records on your farm, both from a regulatory and compliance standpoint, but also from sort of a business and profitability assessment standpoint. I'm gonna give my framework for the basic and basically minimum requirements that I would recommend for what kinds of records you should be keeping. Maria is going to talk about recommendations for how to level up your record keeping practices using different forms of technology. And then Paulina is going to come in at the end and talk about how record keeping is important for the three major compliance areas that we work on, which is FSMA, the Food Safety Modernization Act, organic certification, and then GAP or Good Agricultural Practice audits. And a really important point in our workshop is that we just recognize that there's no one size fits all approach. So if you take one thing away with you today, it's that your record keeping practices and strategies have to fit your style of farming and your own comfortability with technology. So they have to work for you. It is our goal to like present a suite of options, and then understanding that each farm is going to have different needs and strengths as far as record keeping. So to make sure you're essentially taking what works and just leave the rest. And you can go to the next slide. Cool. So just to give an overview of our approach and the lens that we're trying to use for this workshop, record keeping can be simple. I think I've talked to a lot of farmers who feel that this is a fairly daunting topic, and we're hoping to break it down and sort of like demystify record keeping and give some suggestions for how to do that. You definitely don't have to start from scratch. A big part of my job and Paulina's job at CAFF is to create record keeping templates and sort of to work on this resource creation and compilation of a lot of different organizations that make these records for you. And so you can download them, fill them out, adjust them to meet your own needs. But you certainly don't need to start from scratch when you're creating a good record keeping system. As I said before, record keeping strategies are never one size fits all. It's all dependent on the farmer, your employees, maybe your crew lead, farm manager, the people who are keeping the records, making sure that they can sustain those practices. And then, yeah, whatever strategies you choose must be sustainable for you. So, you might have record keeping goals or aspirations, and I think that's good to have something to work towards. And, every season you're fine tuning and you're adjusting, incorporating new elements. But I want to continue to hammer home that the primary characteristic of a good record keeping system is that it works for your farm. You have to be able to maintain it across, days, weeks, months, years. So if it's not able to be maintained on your farm, it wouldn't really be a successful record keeping strategy. Next slide. Cool. So, how does it benefit me? I'm going to talk first about sort of the certifications and grant side of things. So, having good records is really important for all sorts of legal compliance and going after certifications for your farm. So, we've talked about food safety and organic. You need really rigorous record keeping systems to apply, especially for the voluntary certifications like organic and GAPS. And then, for FSMA compliance as well, if you're a fully covered farm under FSMA, which Paulina will talk about later, you need to have good records, right? That's how the inspector knows they come to your farm. You can demonstrate we have all of our protocols in place. They're written down. We're keeping records of when we clean and sanitize our equipment. We're keeping records of what compost we're using and when we apply it. And why this is really important from a business standpoint too is basically you're setting yourself up as you prepare for more and more rigorous certifications. You can build on a good foundation for your record keeping strategy. So allow yourself the opportunity to sell into new markets or to get a higher price point for your crops, right? That's the point in a lot of cases of getting an organic certification is it opens new markets. So if you have these practices in place, you're setting yourself up for future success as you sort of, yeah, pursue and achieve more compliances or certifications. And then grants. I know a lot of farmers are sort of trying to figure out how to get their foot in the door on a lot of these grants, be they federal through the USDA, state through CDFA, or private grant funding. All of these require records. I would be, I think, hard pressed to find a grant that doesn't require you to upload some sort of documentation about your practices or, having good financial record keeping. So by keeping records, again, like the day-to-day practice of this on your farm, you'll be more prepared to apply when grant opportunities or emergency relief funding comes around. So again, like we've worked with farmers who they want to get organic certified and we'll work with them for a couple of months and they build this whole record keeping and then they pass their certification and then find that it's very difficult to maintain that the following year. Um, so if you're starting to build these things in, I think of like step by step, move slow, you're building a foundation. Each year you improve, and then you're gonna set yourself up for more success as your farm becomes ready to apply for some of these certifications and grants. Next slide. And then another thing I always talk about with farmers, is like, how does it benefit me from the business side? A lot of us are, really, really understandably invested in having viable small farm businesses. And so I always try to like dovetail this conversation about certifications and formalizing your practices with some of the financial benefits that I've seen in my experience as a farm manager. So I really believe that keeping records helps keep your business viable on a variety of counts. The first one I always say to farmers is keeping sales data is really, really helpful. Not only are you going to need that sales data, when your organic inspector comes around or you're applying for, an emergency relief grant after a flood or a drought, you need financial records. But it also really helps you. You're sitting down in the off season, and taking a look at what you've sold this season. How does it compare to previous seasons? Hopefully you're keeping good sales data by crop and you can do crop by crop revenue comparisons. Um, Good sales data can help you know which are your best customers or buyers, and if you need to, potentially expand or turn up or turn down any of your markets. It helps you assess your profitability across different market channels. So having useful sales data can cover all of these different benefits to your farm. And then same thing with yield data, right? Understanding that harvest or yield data is different from sales data because you don't always sell everything that you grow. But having detailed yield data is also very helpful for understanding the impact if you change production practices from season to season, understanding what are your highest yielding crops. And I know a lot of us are, confined by small acreage. And so being able to really understand which of your crops are making you money and using your acreage more strategically, especially when you're crop planning for the next season. And then another important part of yield data, in my experience, is, especially if you're selling through wholesale markets, new buyers want to know when and how much product you'll have. So knowing, past seasons worth of data and getting good at fine tuning, basically your yield forecasts, it can really improve the relationship with a wholesale buyer, because you can know in exactly what months is your crop going to be peaking, right? Like knowing how much you can expect to yield per acre or per bed foot. Um, so this kind of data, like as I'm saying, serves two functions. It's really important for these certifications, but then it also really helps us like level up and hone our ability to assess what's working and what isn't working as far as our production plan, and how we're selling our crops. Okay, so I'm going to present my personal recommendation for a record keeping framework. We talk a lot in the certification world about seed to sale, because those are the steps of your farm processes that get verified, or inspected when the auditor or the inspector comes to your farm, right? So on the left side here, I'm showing all of the on-farm records that I really recommend you to start to implement in your weekly, monthly practices on the farm. So from seed to sale, again, you want to have a sowing or transplant record, and these can be very simple, right? Date, variety, number of trays you sowed, or if you're direct sowing, number of rows or bed feet. And that's a very simple, that's 3 columns in your record. And every time you seed something, that goes right onto your record as you're doing the activity. You want to have an input record. Again, this is very simple: date, product, basically the brand name if you have it, and the quantity, how much you're putting down. And this is true for, compost, other fertility, both during tillage, and if you're side dressing, just quickly noting down how much did I put on which beds and on what date. And input records are definitely a requirement for a lot of the certifications that we've been talking about. A harvest record, that's very simple. Date, crop, and quantity. So as you're bringing things in from the field, they're getting weighed or they're getting counted and written down. A sales record, right, which as I mentioned is different from a harvest record. So you want to know the price and the buyer name as well. And then a very simple equipment sanitation log. So, if you're cleaning your knives or your harvest crates, just noting down the date and that they were cleaned. And then same thing with employee training logs, which is very important in the food safety world. So those are six, quick records that I would really recommend, and that sort of covers a lot of your bases. Once you start to actually prepare for certifications, you will need to tailor your record keeping to meet the requirements of the specific certification. But I think of this as like essentially a scaffolding that's going to provide you a very strong footing for preparing for those certifications. And then the other part of record keeping, in addition to records, is keeping your receipts, which I always sort of say to farmers, like, you can never keep too many receipts. I recommend you keep your seed purchases, any input purchases for compost and amendments, and then keeping water and soil test results is best practice. In general, you need that for food safety compliance, and then it's also very beneficial for your farm in general to know what's happening in your water and in your soil. Okay, so really quickly, just to clarify, this is another common question we get from farmers. What is the difference between a record and an SOP? So a record I think of as basically, a past-oriented document. So you're writing down actions that already happened. This can be as simple as like, we know the protocol and someone who's doing it is just signing off that they did the protocol. So a record is built up over time. It's updated regularly, right? Usually this is for a repeated action. So every time you clean your harvest knives or wash down the pack house, you're going to keep a record that, cleaned the harvest knives on this date, signed by the person who did it. And it often includes details like, you want to have the title of the record on there, typically the date, maybe the time that it happened, and then the initials of who did it. And then usually you want to have these things signed off by like the farm manager or the supervisor. And a record is very different from an SOP or a standard operating procedure, which I like to think of as future oriented. Essentially, you're writing down the protocols or the course of action. If something were to happen on your farm, it's like an articulation of processes that you have, or it can be a plan for mitigating and correcting risks, especially in the case of food safety. So a good example is like what to do if I find like bird poop in my field and I have a written procedure that my crew knows, I create a buffer area and it's this wide and I don't harvest anything from there. So I like to think about it too as like a recipe card for how to carry out a procedure. It'll list out the ingredients or like the materials needed and then the instructions on how to do it. And then again, to simplify all of this stuff, if it's feeling overwhelming, an SOP doesn't need to be updated very often. I would recommend you just review your SOPs, maybe one day in the winter, and you're updating those annually. Or, of course, anytime there's a change in the procedure and you want to make sure that your written SOPs reflect the on-the-ground reality of what you're doing on the farm. Next slide. Thank you. So just a quick image of like a record and how it looks different from an SOP. And again, just to reiterate, these templates already exist. So these are available for free online on CAFF's website. And I'll talk about a couple more places to get record templates that are free. But you can see on the left side, our record, it has blank spaces to fill in, the date, the thing that's being done, the person who's doing it, and it's going to be signed off by the manager. And then an SOP is a little bit different. It looks more like our recipe metaphor, but you have the name of the SOP, so the name of the process, who is in charge of doing it, how often does it get done, what are the materials you need to do it, and then that step-by-step protocol, which is hopefully, not being changed or updated very regularly. Okay, and then I'm going to run through a few templates here. So CAFF.org has a really, really rich library of food safety plan templates. This is just screenshot from CAFF.org. So we have templates for your food safety plan, training documents for employee training. We have template SOPs already written out. A lot of this stuff is translated into Spanish. Some of it has been translated into Hmong, so that makes it extra accessible if you have employees that speak a different language than you. It's very helpful to have these things posted, of course, in the language that your employees speak. So please take a look at caf.org/food safety plan templates. If you're preparing for a GAP audit or going for a GAP certification, I highly recommend Cornell's Good Agricultural Practices program. They have specific GAP required records. And again, you just click these pluses and there's template records for all of these different categories for your GAPs. If you're trying to get yourself in FSMA compliance, CAFF's website can help with that. But additionally, the Produce Safety Alliance out of Cornell has some really excellent records and SOP templates for specifically FSMA required records. So as you can see here, this is like how to do that visual inspection on your agricultural water system. So that's up for free online. And then finally, in the case of organic, I really recommend USDA's AMS, the Agricultural Marketing Service. They have some really wonderful templates for the required records for organic certification. So you can find those on USDA's website. So yeah, hopefully that covers, sort of a high level picture of what I recommend to farmers when I go and come out and do a farm visit with you all. And I'm going to turn it over to Maria, who's going to talk about how to sort of level up your technologies and create good record keeping systems.
Thank you, Arabelle. Yeah, so now we're going to talk about how can I do my record keeping. I would pretty much sum it up in three different ways that you can do your record keeping. You can do paper record keeping, which is the traditional way of doing it, where you have binders and notebooks and you just gather all your papers and receipts. You organize them and then you use them whenever you need to reference them, whether that's for certifications, grant applications, or because you have an audit or just want to check your historical data. You can also do digital record keeping that you can do on your computer using tools like Microsoft Word or Microsoft Excel. So that way you can have your documents living in your computer and you don't have 100 million papers that you need to sort through. And then finally, there's online record keeping where your records live in the cloud, which means that they live in the internet, so you can easily share it with anybody that needs to reference them. You can easily email them, and there are different tools to have it in the cloud, like Google Drive, and we will go through each one of them in a minute. So for paper record keeping, which is a traditional way of doing record keeping, it's very easy. So we're gonna go through some pros and cons of having this. If you haven't done any sort of record keeping or you haven't done much record keeping in the past, starting with paper record keeping, it's very easy and it's very likely to get filled out by you and your employees. Especially if you are not too comfortable with technology, or maybe you don't have a computer at home, or maybe your maybe you don't have a smartphone, or maybe your smartphone doesn't is not that powerful, so it can open many apps. So that's a good way to start with paper record keeping. It's very easy to start. Like Arabelle mentioned, there are many different templates are available that you can just print out and fill out. If you don't want to do that, you can also start by scratch, just adding all the columns you need and filling it out. The cons of starting with paper record keeping is that it can take longer to find the records that you already have if you're having an inspection or an audit, and you are not able to access them online or share them over email. So if you need to, for example, apply for a grant application and you need to have your financial data to apply for that application, you need to transfer everything to your computer, whether that is transcribing it or scanning it. So it's the accessibility point is much lower. It's not easily shareable. And also notebooks can get lost. If you're working in the farm, it can get covered with soil. It can get lost if you just like put them in the car and forget about them. And also if it's raining or if there are any kind of weather extremes, it can make it very tough to keep those records updated. So those are some of the cons of having paper record keeping. If you do decide to start with paper record keeping because it's much simpler, you just need a notebook that you already have in your house. Some tips, it's to keep your records organized. I would suggest to divide your records by year and by category. So Arabelle mentioned some really good records that you can do to start your record keeping journey. So I would suggest just organize them between production records, separate from financial records, etc. And that way, whenever you have to reference your previous records because you need to, apply for a certification, or maybe just because you want to see how things went on your previous seasons, it's much easier for you to locate where they are. Also, another tip is to keep the records for the required amount of time. This is especially important if you have any certifications that you're applying for or any grants that you want to apply for. Sometimes you need to send records from last year, from 2 years ago. So keeping your records for a good amount of time, it's ideal. And also for certain certifications, there is a minimum required amount. Some certifications require you to keep records for 2 years. Some of them require you to keep them for 5 years. So always have that in mind. What is your goal? Why you're doing your record keeping, and adapt your strategy to that. And finally, if you're doing paper record keeping, I always advise this to the farmers that I work with. Take pictures of your farm periodically. And this is especially useful when you are applying for grant applications. So it doesn't have to be every day, it doesn't have to be every week, but whenever there is a new activity coming up in your farm, if you're changing something in your farm or if you're applying something in your farm, try to take a quick picture and just store them because you may need them in the future. For example, there are many emergency relief programs that require you to take pictures if you have lost your crops, if you have been impacted by flooding, if you lost your crops because of the heat. Always keep good pictures of those different activities so you can be more prepared if you want to apply for these grants in the future. Now, what if I want to do digital record keeping? Some pros about having your record keeping in your computer, for example, or if in any electronic device, is that you don't need to sort out any papers. So it's much easier to get organized. You don't need to have a file cabinet. You can just organize them in your computer with the appropriate year, in the appropriate folder, and then it's much easier to locate them when you need them. Also, if you are doing financial records, it's much easier to do it in your computer because any sort of math operation, like if you need to add up all your expenses for the year, or if you're doing a profit and loss balance, all these different math operations can be done automatically on your computer. So you are going to save time and there is less chance of error because the math operations are being done, are getting done automatically. And also another pro is that your records live in your computer, so you don't have to, go through all your papers to find a specific piece of record. And also you can easily share them. You can transfer them into a flash drive and then pull it up in a different device or take it to whoever needs to see all that information. Now, there are some cons to doing digital record keeping. First is that you're going to need an electronic device to do it. If you are doing records that need constant updating, I would recommend you do it in a computer just so you can easily view and update them. The good thing is that you don't need an internet connection to use tools like Microsoft Word or Excel. You can just update your records and they live in your computer, and then you can easily share them. Another con is that if you are not used to working with a computer, the learning curve can be steep. But if you are familiar, if you use computer on your daily basis, or if you just feel comfortable using your computer, this is a great way to keep your records organized and sorted out for whenever you need them. So I'm going to go through a couple tools that are really useful. The first one is Microsoft Word. Probably most people in the audience knows about it, and it's very easy to keep your records and your logs in your computer. You can have availability lists that you can easily update and send, and you can easily reference the ones that you had for your previous season. You can copy these records, you can duplicate them. So there is a lot of flexibility in what you can do with records that you already have and using templates that already exist. So you don't have to start from scratch. Like Arabelle mentioned, there are many templates available. There's a lot of them even in the CAFF website that you can easily download and start filling out. So the starting point is much easier here. You can do other things like crop planning that you can easily share with your buyers via email. So there are many upsides to using a tool like Microsoft Word. And if you want to do spreadsheets, you can use Microsoft Excel. And this is very useful if you want to do your own invoices, if you need to do your annual profit and loss balance, if you want to do any kind of cash flow or financial projections. Microsoft Word is going to make your life so much easier because it's going to do all the math operations by yourself. If you see in the slide, you can see that the subtotal gets added automatically, the tax gets added automatically. And like I mentioned, there are many templates available, so you don't need to create any spreadsheet by scratch. And there are many resources if you want to learn how to use spreadsheets and want to learn how to edit them. I have linked here the Farmer Spreadsheet Academy that has a lot of different templates that are geared for farmers to do all these different financial records. And there are also many templates that are already available, and we're going to put them in the chat later. Okay, so we talked about paper record keeping and digital record keeping, but there's another one, online record keeping. And this is where you can have your records live in the cloud, which means they live in the internet, and that makes it easily shareable and easily accessible by you or anybody that you want. So if you're working with a crew or have many different employees that need to access certain records, this is a great way to make that transfer information easier. And the good thing is that you can also view and update your records on your phone. So that makes it easier for you if you need to do any on-farm record keeping. You can just like bring your smartphone and start editing anything you need to edit, or you can update any records in real time. And the good thing about online record keeping is that there are many, many tools and software available to do a wide variety of tasks and resources for your farm. The cons are that you may need internet connection to operate most of these tools and software that can span many different tasks like crop planning and farm mapping. And also, most software and apps have monthly subscription costs. There are a few that are free, but if you want a really robust tool that can help you do many different things at the same time, that is very user-friendly, they sometimes have a monthly subscription cost. And also, and finally, this is very important. If you're not comfortable using your smartphone or using electronic devices, the learning curve and the setup time can be very high. So that's something to keep in mind. Even though there are many cons to having online record keeping, like Arabelle mentioned, it needs to be sustainable for you. So I'm just presenting these 3 different strategies for you to kind of figure out which one would be best applied in your farm, depending on how comfortable you feel and how comfortable your crew feels. So to talk a little bit more about online record keeping, this tool, Google Drive, it's a great tool. It's a free software that can keep all your folders and files easily organized and easily shareable. They have their own versions of Word and Excel. They're called Google Docs and Google Sheets that you can use for documents and spreadsheets. And as you can see, you all have them in the same dashboard, and you can easily like see what has been the recent folders that you open. You can sort them out by your favorite, or you can star the documents that you use the most. Maybe you can put your SOPs here. So it's a really great way to have all your information organized. There are other software, especially farm management apps, that are really good because they can help you do a variety of different tasks. Here I have an example of a software called Tent that works both on the web and on your phone and has an offline mode. It can help you with many different farm tasks like farm mapping, crop planning, task management, farm accounting, and more. The dashboard is very user-friendly, but as it oftentimes happens with these really powerful tools, they do have a monthly subscription cost. So I would recommend this for somebody that really wants to have all their information centralized. If you feel comfortable using your phone to update your records and you really need to, share them with many employees, this can be a great tool. But like I mentioned, just assess that level of comfort and what kind of records you need, and have that as your primary goal to select what kind of strategy fits your operation best. And Ten is not the only farm management app that is out there. There are many more. Here I have a few other options like Farm OS, which is a free tool and it's open source. That does also many of these different tasks like farm mapping and crop planning. There's Farm Race, and there are also many more more specialized software that can help you with many different tasks. So again, just to reiterate, there are templates out there, so you don't need to start your record keeping from scratch. You can easily download some templates that are readily available for farmers right now. You can print them out and fill them out, or you can, fill them out in your computer. You can just use the strategy that works best for you, that is more sustainable for you to keep you doing your record keeping season after season. And yeah, I think I'm gonna leave it there. And I'm gonna pass it along to Paulina.
Thank you, Maria. Okay, so hello everyone. To briefly recap, Arabelle gave a great overview of record-keeping benefits, basic record-keeping recommendations and suggestions, why it all really matters, the difference between a record and a standard operating procedure, or also known as an SOP, and how they're both important documents to keep. And Maria now shared different record-keeping techniques, paper, digital, online, the pros and cons of each, and what online programs exist to simplify record keeping if you're ready to take your record keeping to that next level. So now I will be talking about compliance and how records support you in your compliance journey. So when we talk about compliance in farmers, there are three big programs that come to mind, and those are the ones we see here on the screen. They are the Food Safety Modernization Act, also known as FSMA, the National Organic Program, also known as the NOP, and food safety audits, which are sometimes called third-party audits. So we'll delve deeper into each program and how record keeping supports you in complying with these programs in the following slides. So the big three, I want to give a high-level overview of the differences of these three big programs and what each of these mean and how they relate to record keeping. But I do just want to clarify right off the bat so everybody can understand that all of these three programs require records that very much overlap sometimes. So if you are already complying with a certain program and say then you want to move on to get your organic certification, or you have your organic certification and then you want to move on to going through a third-party food safety audit, there are many records that you're already might be keeping, which you don't have to create for these different compliances. So just wanting to highlight that. So when it comes to FSMA, FSMA is a federal law. So FSMA, the Food Safety Modernization Act, is not voluntary. So if you are a grower who's growing fresh produce that's usually consumed raw or ready to eat, then you may be subject to FSMA. And maybe many of you in attendance are aware of that. So just wanting to make that clear, FSMA is a federal law. And in terms of who oversees FSMA compliance, here in California, it is the California Department of Food and Agriculture's Produce Safety Program. So CDFA is the entity who oversees FSMA compliance here in the state of California. And as shared, FSMA covers fresh produce that's usually ready to eat, consumed raw. And then the National Organic Program, or the NOP, is a voluntary program. So that means if you want your produce to be certified organic, that's something that you are seeking out voluntarily. And who oversees the National Organic Program? Well, those are different certifying agents, accredited certifying agents. An example is CCOF. And the NOP covers organic produce, livestock, processing, and handling. And any fees applicable for the NOP are paid for by the farmer, so they are a responsibility of the farmer. And we see that with food safety audits, or also known as third-party audits, these are voluntary. Yeah, the farmer seeks them out. Maybe your buyer is requesting that you have a third-party food safety audit. You need that certificate. You have to undergo that audit to keep selling to that buyer. Or maybe you are trying to expand your market and you understand that there's a potential buyer that you want to work with who requests a third-party audit. So again, voluntary. And then who oversees these third-party audits? These are different private entities such as USDA, Primus, CCOF, and many others. Again, food safety audits cover fresh produce and any fees applicable are paid for by the farmer. Okay, so just wanting to give a high-level overview of the difference between these big three programs, but really just wanting to emphasize and highlight how all of these programs require records and many of these records may overlap. So many of the times you don't even have to recreate records when you're jumping from different compliance programs. Next slide, please. Okay, so FSMA, the Food Safety Modernization Act, and its required records. So FSMA has specific required records based on how your farm is categorized under FSMA. And we're not going to go into detail on how your farm is categorized under FSMA in this presentation, but CAFF has resources. So whenever you have a chance, go to CAFF's website. We have one-pagers on each FSMA categorization. However, just wanting to highlight here, there's three FSMA categorizations. You're either covered under FSMA, or you're qualified exempt, or you're exempt. So if you're a covered farm under FSMA, you have to comply with all of FSMA requirements and you have to keep specific records. So you have to record almost everything when it comes to your on-farm's food safety practices. And just a quick shout out and resource here that we see this image on the slide, the CAFF's food safety plan template has in red font the FSMA required records outlined in the food safety plan template. It also in blue font indicates suggested records that you are suggested or recommended to keep to prepare yourself for a third-party audit or just complying with basic good agricultural practices, also known as GAPs. So just wanting to highlight that in terms of a resource that's already available. And also noting that these records and resources are not comprehensive. So just wanting to highlight that in terms of maybe this can be a starting point for you. And then once you understand what your FSMA categorization is, then you can understand what to look for in terms of the required records. So you're either covered under FSMA, have to comply with all of FSMA requirements and keep certain records, or you're a qualified exempt farm under FSMA. And that means you have to comply with some aspects of FSMA and keep records. Okay. And then if you are an exempt farm, you have to keep records that demonstrate that you are exempt from FSMA. So we notice a pattern here. Whatever your FSMA categorization is, you still have to keep records. Okay, so that really just emphasizes the understanding that it might be daunting or scary to think about these different compliance programs. However, all of these, whatever way your form is categorized, you must keep records of some sort. And I just want to note here that the retention of records, so I know there was a question in the Q&A, and just wanting to highlight this, that FSMA requires retention of all records for at least 2 years after the record is created. Okay, so just wanting to highlight that. Sweet. And now the National Organic Program, or the NOP, and its required records. So the National Organic Program is guided by the Organic System Plan, and the Organic System Plan requires different paperwork and records that accompany this plan. So you want to check with your certifier to ensure you are completing their specific required paperwork when it comes to your Organic System Plan. However, just wanting to mention the main scopes of organic certification record keeping to comply with the National Organic Program. That includes keeping records of your production practices, including your crop rotation plan, records of pest and disease management, of your post-harvest handling, of your organic seed search, if there are no organic seeds available, of your natural resource monitoring, and many more, such as in and out records. As Arabelle shared, that notion of seed to sale, keeping records to ensure that you have records to note of the amount of your organic inputs on your farm matches the amount of organic outputs. So many of you who are probably already certified organic understand these mass balance audits that occur during these organic inspections. So just really honing in that these are specific required records. And again, wanting to note the retention of required records. The organic regulations require retention for at least 5 years after the record is created. And just a little plug right now that one of the next workshops after our workshop will be the organic record. We'll be sharing the path to organic record keeping, and there will be a farmer who will be sharing their record keeping techniques for their organic inspections and to comply with their organic certification. So just wanting to highlight that there. Awesome. And then in terms of food safety audits and required records, or also known as third-party audits, I just want to start by giving this pro tip, and many of you all in attendance might know this already, but just wanting to highlight that it is recommended to have at least 1 month worth of records before requesting your first audit. Okay, and this is very important because I can share on a personal note that the third-party audits that I've been in attendance, just like being a overlooker and supporting farmers to get to that point, many of the times where farmers lost points during their audit was because they didn't have a certain specific record. So just wanting to highlight that if you're seeking a third-party audit, it's recommended to have at least 1 month worth of records, of completed records. And highlighting here the main scopes of a food safety audit and the records required are records of your general farm overview, records of harvest and packing practices, of post-harvest practices, storage and transportation, and highlighting here that the audit scope and the complexity of records that are required from you to comply with depend on the type of audit you choose. So we see in this slide the image of the screenshot of the first page of the USDA Basic Gap audit checklist. So a tip would be to whatever audit you are looking to go through, you go through that checklist of the audit and see what records are being required and asked of you, what standard operating procedures are being asked of you, and then work from there. So you could gather all the records and SOPs that are being asked and ensure and check, are you keeping those records? If not, you want to create those. Are you keeping those standard operating procedures? If not, you want to create those. So you can use the third-party audit checklist as a guide for you to ensure you are keeping those required records. Again, this will change depending on the type of audit you are requesting. And then also wanting to highlight here the retention of records. So for food safety audits, they require retention of all records for at least 2 years after the record is created. And again, just wanting to finalize with the fact that you don't have to go at this alone. There are a lot of resources out there. There are templates available from CAFF, from different organizations. So maybe you can just use your resources, and maybe you find that CAF is missing a record that you are looking for. Maybe another organization has that record. Also, just wanting to highlight, I know in the Q&A there was a question of if there are production records or specific production records where it includes like per acre yield. If you have a template already, you could also just edit that template of your record and add that element in that record. So again, you don't have to start from scratch. So please use your resources. And then just a final thank you to you all for being in attendance and for your time and attention. I know we're going to get into questions right now, but I just wanted to highlight that our Farmer Services program, which Arabelle, Maria, and I are under in CAFF, we hold weekly office hours every Monday, except holidays, from 3:30 to 4:30. So if you want that Zoom link, we can share that with you, and we try to always have someone in attendance who is able to support you in either English or Spanish. So thank you all for your time and attention, and I think we will be doing the question portion now.
Great. Thanks, everyone. So, as you can see, we've put our emails and our phone numbers here. You're welcome to take those down if you have specific questions or requests from any of us. As I mentioned before, when the slide was not working, I serve farmers like typically in the Greater Bay Area. Paulina serves farmers on the Central Coast. And then Maria works statewide and is based in the Central Valley. So you're welcome to reach out to us directly. And then, yeah, we can send you that office hours Zoom link if you'd like to attend and, just come with questions and we're here to help you. So I think with that, we've been trying to answer some of your questions in the Q&A box during the presentation. But you're welcome to add any questions you have in the Q&A or in the chat at the moment. And we can take those and yeah, don't be shy. Or you can't come off mute. So yeah, put those in the chat or in the Q&A and we can help answer your questions.
And there was one question in the chat that says if we can provide the presentation PDF. We will be sending that presentation over everybody who RSVP to the meeting. Yeah, we'll send it over email later today. So expect that in your inbox in a few hours. And also, this meeting is being recorded and it will be uploaded into YouTube later today. So if you don't want to go through the presentation, maybe you just want to hear some of the discussion that we had here today, you're also able to do that. All right. I don't see any questions coming in, so I'm gonna ask a question to Paulina and Arabelle. Let's pretend I am a farmer and I never done record keeping before and I don't know how to start. So what would you guys recommend to a farmer that has never done record keeping before and it's looking to see how to start?
Yeah, I can share a little bit with that. I honestly would suggest starting with the basics as far as Arabelle shared, like your equipment cleaning and disinfecting logs. Are you doing that? And maybe you're not doing that. So that's a good place to start. Thinking about, but also that can be daunting. So thinking about what you're already practicing. So you harvest on a weekly basis, have a record of your harvest. So before you harvest, you ensure that you're not harvesting anything that's visibly contaminated or likely contaminated. If there is something like that, you want to have like a corrective actions log where you write down, this week there was some bird poop on the romaine on a certain like block. I didn't harvest that portion, including that. Uh, High level, you could also just really start with understanding your FSMA categorization. Because if you are a farmer growing fresh produce, you most likely are subject to comply with FSMA. So you want to understand where you fall under FSMA and then see what are the required records there. So I would say to start off with what you're already doing, but also focus in and understand where you fall, how your farm is categorized under FSMA and what those required records are for your FSMA categorization.
Yeah, thanks, Paulina. I would add maybe Maria, you can show the slide really quickly of like my simple recommendation for that scaffolding. And we can leave that up for a few minutes for folks to take down notes or yeah, check themselves. Yeah, perfect. That would be my recommendation on a place to start. And especially if you're someone who's going to keep records on paper, like in a binder, you would have your records and then, some kind of divider and then your receipts and test results on the other side of the binder. So those 6 records I recommend on one side, and then those 4 different receipts and test results I recommend on the other side. Okay, checking the chat. So, Christine in the chat says, where can we access templates for specific record keeping, like cleaning, maintenance of tools, etc.? We have a harvest log, but was curious what other record keeping would be necessary or helpful for a small urban farm. Yeah, so I would recommend these same records for any farm, no matter really what your scale is, but especially for smaller farms. I think this 6 and these 4 are a great place to start. Um, and those kinds of specific logs for cleaning and maintenance can be found either on CAFF.org's Food Safety Plan Templates webpage, or on Cornell. If you search into Google, like Cornell GAPS record keeping, you should be able to find that. And then again, we'll send those links out in our follow-up email to all the attendees here. Next question in the chat from Maria. She says, I'm wondering if the record keeping apps you shared are translated in Spanish. Maria, do you have a sense of that?
Yes, as of now, I believe none of the farm management apps are available in Spanish. But the good thing is that some of the templates that CAF has developed are available in Spanish. Like you mentioned, some of those logs and SOPs are available in Spanish in the CAF website. So, yeah, unfortunately, none of the apps are available in Spanish. If you want to use Microsoft Word, Excel, or Google Drive, those are available in Spanish. You just need to have your computer or your smartphone or the electronic device that you're using to open those tools already in Spanish, and that way it all automatically come in Spanish.
Awesome. Okay, folks are leaving some more resources in the chat. I'm going to go over to our Q&A box. So I'm seeing a question from Alex. Does CAF offer farm visits and recommendations regarding food safety, i.e., if we wanted a third party to view our harvest, wash and pack practices, but without the pressure of having a formal auditing organization visit? Yeah, that's a great question. I think you're in my region, so why don't you shoot me an email and we can talk it through? I'd be happy to like either get on a Zoom call or especially your farm is near my house. I can come and take a look at some of that stuff and we can talk it through together. But for folks who are not directly living near where I live. Um, there's also an option to request a like a what's the word, Paulina? Like a essentially like practice audit or like a walkthrough inspection for FSMA. Yeah, so that would be through the CDFA produce safety team. Is that right? Can you verify that? Yeah.
Yeah, it's called an on-farm review. And the produce safety program, just a quick note, is that their think slogan is to educate before regulating. So it's like that no pressure of just overseeing. However, one big thing to note with those is that if the produce safety program team would find an egregious condition on your farm, that would have to be reported. I think it would to FDA. So just a note with that, but I can share that in the chat. And also, I noticed that I think anything that I'm sharing in the chat is not accessible to all attendees. I don't know if somebody can confirm that.
Yeah, this is why I was asking people to use the Q&A function, because you can address those there.
Okay, that's good to know.
Okay, I'm gonna go to the next question in the Q&A box. So someone says, I feel like I keep really complete records, but it takes a lot of my time. Yes. I'm looking for ways to streamline or shave some minutes off each entry. I'm especially thinking about the financial entries that I still do manually, but basically all of it takes a lot of time. Any suggestions or resources? Yeah, this is an amazing question. I think this sort of gets at like the crux of what we're trying to talk about and, a lot of what the three of us do in our jobs at CAFF. Um, so I have some suggestions just from my sort of experience in farm management, but then maybe you both can answer as well. Um, yeah, I think like one suggestion I have is to digitize some of those systems, right? So you mentioned you're keeping some of your financial records on paper or manually, and I think financial records, in my opinion, are a great one to think about digitizing, right? So starting to keep those financial records through an online accounting software like QuickBooks, that's going to automate some of that stuff, right? And it allows you to like keep your data, run reports automatically. So it takes away some of the like manual, mental back of the envelope work that you might be doing. You can pull like, you know, records of all of your buyers from a season and it'll rank it by gross sales to each of those buyers. So figuring out when and where it's strategic to digitize, I think would be my first suggestion. Another thing that I've practiced in my own experience is, um, like a lot of farmers I know like to keep records on paper during the course of the week or during the season, and then you can move those into digital form, in the off season. So, which I think is a different practice than, I've worked on farms that have like an iPad with the records pulled up, and the manager is just like automatically entering those things as you're bringing in the harvest, you're weighing the produce, and you're entering that automatically into an online program. So taking out some of the experience of time of having to transfer records from one format to the other, that could potentially shave off time. And then I was recently in another call with a farmer who um, said that they like to keep records, especially for things like, cleaning and sanitizing or records that are just like you're checking off whether you did them or not. I could see this working in like a sewing log, a seeding log, like rather than having an empty record where the person's writing down like this is the date, this is the time, this is my name, I sanitized and I used this ratio of bleach to water and I wiped off this surface and then I signed it off. You could just have the SOP written up and say, like, did you do these steps? Yes or no, on this time in the week. And then all they have to do is sign the paper. So it takes away like all of those extra steps of actually filling out the log, across those columns. But instead, it's like, this is when we clean and this is how we do it. Did you do it? Yes or no? And then you just put your signature. So I thought that was a helpful recommendation. Those are some of my thoughts. Do you all have other thoughts to add?
That was a great tip.
Cool. Maria, any thoughts?
Yeah, we have another question, and I know we're 7 minutes away from the end of our workshop, so I just want to keep moving. So Patricia's asking, there are a lot of software programs out there, but will you please recommend one I can use for a small walnut orchard? If you want to use a software, I would first ask you, what are your goals with record keeping? Because like Arabelle mentioned, there is not a one size fits all. So really you need to ask yourself, what am I trying to record keep and why? So for example, all the different software that I showed, like Tent, Farm OS, somebody in the chat also mentioned Light Farm. They're all great pieces of software, but they have different capabilities. So it really depends on what's your end goal for record keeping. So for example, if you are trying to upgrade your financials, maybe you want to try a software that it's just working for financials or has that as one of their strengths. So for example, if you are interested in financials, FarmRace is a good option for a software if you're comfortable with software. There are other softwares like Ambrook. If you want to do something a little bit more not just farm related, you can do QuickBooks that Arabelle mentioned that also can help you with your accounting. So I would say it really depends. If you are more interested in a software because you want to try out the farm mapping capabilities and task management, then maybe Tent is a better option. But there are also other software that are free that you can use if you don't want to pay that monthly subscription. So for example, Airtable, it's a way that you can create different forms and then you can share that with your employees just to like share checklists that they can just check off. So it's like kind of like a way to digitize what Arabelle was mentioning of having somebody just like signing on an SOP. There is also like a digital version to do that. So it really depends on what you need. And like I mentioned, I'm CAF's small farm technology advisor, and my whole area of expertise is helping farmers find those strategies that fit for their farm. So if you want to send me an email after this workshop, Patricia, we can work one-on-one and we can have a discussion of what you need and see what are the best options out there. So with that, I'm gonna go to the next question. Are you aware of any programs or discounts to help cover the cost of farm softwares? That is a great question. For farm softwares, I think you really need to be creative if you want to do that. So, for example, there are some grant applications that can help you cover like farm software and farm management tools. For example, one that comes to mind was the recent urban agriculture grant. One of their covered supplies or tools was farm management software. Um, I I don't think there are many grants that would help cover this cost. But if you get creative, you might find them. Um, so yeah, I would just recommend that. Be very creative, and always when you see a grant application that has some sort of language that could cover these kind of tools, just send an email and ask, I want to use this to pay for X software. Is this, eligible? And that way you can just, directly have an answer to your question.
I would add, I'm pretty sure that the new Southwest Regional Food Business Center, they have these micro grants that are like $5,000, and a lot of that is just like leveling up your sales and marketing. And I'm pretty sure that those grants can go to cover like an accounting software or something that's considered to be like, increasing your market access or your marketing abilities. So I would look into those. That's the Southwest Regional Food Business Center. Um, what is the name of the grant? Business Builder Awards. Yeah.
Yeah. And just one last thing. You don't need to necessarily go for a software that has a monthly subscription cost. There are some that are completely free. Like I mentioned, they may have less capabilities, but if you get creative, you might make it work for your farm and your operations. So from the examples that we saw, Farm OS is a good example of a farm management software that is free. Sorry for that. My dog's going crazy in the background. And Light Farm, it's also a really good option. I completely missed that one. And like it was mentioned in the chat, Light Farm is also available in Spanish and it's free. So there you have at least, two different options of farm management software that you can use without paying for it.
Okay, great. So I think that is just about the time we have. I would recommend folks to take a look in the Q&A box under our answered questions. Paulina has been rigorously linking to all of these things that we're referencing, all sorts of really helpful websites in there that you might want to click on and save and bookmark to be able to revisit again in the future. But yeah, just to clarify, we'll send out an email with follow-up, I think I linked to the slides and a lot of these links as well so that folks can access those. And I think with that, we're going to close. Thank you to everyone for attending and asking such great questions. Feel free to reach out. Maybe, Maria, can you put our contact info up? Oh, Guido's going to share a closing video. Thanks so much.